Hello, everybody. My name is Angela Cummins, and today I have my wonderful friend, Angelo Quintano. That's the first time I've said that without a Geordie accent. For those people who really do know me, even though I don't sound like it, I am originally from the Northeast. And whenever I talk to people from the Northeast, I do naturally talk like a Geordie. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not I keep my posh telephone voice speaking to our Ange. Interestingly, Angelo and I both call each other Ange, so hopefully you can tell the difference between our voices. But Angelo has been a friend of mine for about 15, 16 years. We met in Hong Kong when Angelo was working for the British consulate out there in security. I'll let Angelo talk a little bit more about his background, but I know he's an ex-military chap, worked in various different countries after that, and is now a firefighter looking after all those people in the Northeast. Hello, Angelo. How are you doing, pet?
I'm good, thank you. How's you?
I'm champion, thank you. See, I'm already doing it. Already doing Geordie. So if anybody needs subtitles or a translation today, I'm sure we can sort that out. But we'll try and do a posh telephone voices, pet, right?
We'll try.
I was just thinking before we got on, I think I left Newcastle when you moved there.
Well, I moved there around about 2008.
To Newcastle?
Yeah.
No, when you originally first moved to Newcastle, when you were a bairn, how old were you?
Right, I would have been about 10, which would have been around about 1990. God, that sounds really old, doesn't it?
I know, doesn't it? And you moved from Egypt, right?
I did. I grew up in Egypt up until I was about 10 and then moved over to the Northeast.
Could you speak English when you moved over?
No, I couldn't.
So did you actually think that Geordie was English?
Yeah, that was.
You still do, don't you?
Totally.
So you moved over to the Northeast.
Yeah.
I assume went straight to school and didn't know what on earth was going on.
No, straight in the deep end, just the way I like it.
But with a name like Angelo Quintano, it doesn't sound very Egyptian, does it? Really?
No, it doesn't. My mum's Egyptian. I'm half Italian, half Egyptian. So that's where that
would make more sense.
It does.
Do you speak Italian?
No.
Do you speak Arabic?
I do.
With a Geordie accent.
With a Geordie accent. With a Geordie accent. Give us a few Jack Daniels and I'll start demonstrating.
I think you and I shared a few Jack Daniels once upon a time, eh? Body time in Hong Kong back in the day, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't keep up to your standard though.
Nobody could.
They were hard times.
Those were the days, eh? What a playground Hong Kong was.
Totally.
So you left school when you were 16 and joined the army, is that right, Ange?
I left school. I tried doing an apprenticeship, and my heart was always in for the military. I always wanted to join the military, but I tried doing the sensible thing, where I try and get some sort of qualifications to fall back on. I lasted probably about a year.
What was your apprenticeship?
Where?
What was it doing? I don't think I knew about that.
It was carpentry and joinery.
All right.
So I got halfway through it. I had a bad day in the office one day where I fell through the ceiling, and the apprenticeship manager started telling us off and shouted at us, and I had me fill. And I walked off site, and on the way home, I ended up going into the Army Careers office, and I told them I wanted to join. And then I got home, and I said to me mum, right, I've got some really good news and some really bad news. The bad news is I've lost my job as the apprentice, but the good news is I've got a new one. So she was a little bit relieved, and when I told her what it was, she had a bit of a meltdown. But that's how the military started.
You poor man.
I know. I like keeping her on her toes.
So how long were you in the army for?
I've done just over 6 years.
And you did some crazy tours on that as well, I remember, right?
Yeah. When I first joined the army, I didn't tell them about the language, about speaking Arabic. To be quite honest with you, I was a little bit naive. I didn't really understand the magnitude of having a tool like that in my back pocket. I just thought it was just another language that nobody really needs. But I finished basic training. I went and done a UN tour in Cyprus. And somebody escaped through our gates, and he was of Middle Eastern background. And basically, they rang all the satellite stations around HQ to ask if anybody knew of anyone that spoke Arabic. And a friend of mine had answered the phone and said, "Yep, Angelo does." So I got shipped off to HQ. I ended up translating for the medical officer. And from there, that's how the army really found out about my Arabic. And from there, I ended up getting some real fancy tours, one of which I was spending 2 years in Cyprus looking after illegal immigrants. Basically, I was a soldier, but I was told never to wear a uniform. I had my own room. They gave us a hire car. I had a fuel key, and I was my own boss. And I lived in Cyprus for nearly 2
Cyprus
years.
is not a bad place, mind, is it? I love Cyprus.
It was brutal. It was really loved every minute of it. And then when that finished, I went back to my unit, and I just got shipped out to different regiments. Out of just over 6 years, I joined the Royal Artillery. I think I spent about 18 months with my actual regiment. All the rest, I was shipped out to different units, different regiments. I went to Iraq, I went to Afghan. So yeah, it was an amazing career that I had, all because of a tool that I had in my back pocket that I kept quiet, you know.
And obviously, I'm not going to go into, you know, a great deal about, obviously, I'm sure you witnessed things that nobody should ever have seen, and you know, went through stuff and all that sort of stuff. But you carried on being that kind of adrenaline junkie, didn't you? Really, after that, if I can call you an adrenaline junkie. If obviously for the rest of us, looking at somebody like you that does the sort of work that you do, it's quite often like, you know, we just can't comprehend it, you know. And I suppose saying that you're a bit of an adrenaline junkie kind of makes it seem a little bit less serious as well, the sort of dangerous stuff that you've been doing. But it's obviously something that's innate within you, because you've obviously carried on. I mean, I know doing your work for the embassies around the world maybe wasn't quite so hair raising and so serious as obviously the tours in the Middle East and such. But obviously what you're doing now is certainly, you know. So even though I said that you're a firefighter, you actually work out of Biker.
Yeah.
On the boat.
I do.
On the Tyne.
Yeah.
And literally waiting for people to drag them out of the water, if we can say it that way.
Yeah.
So what a job that is, Ange. I mean, like, hats off to you with everything that you've done, you know. Like, it takes somebody with certain nerves or thick skin or experience or whatever to be able to do that. So, you know, amazing stuff. But obviously I'm doing these conversations, these chats, these podcasts, because with the craziness that's going on the planet right now, I do understand that obviously mental health is a massive issue. I do understand that the suicide rate, horrific as it is generally, and I know it's worse in the Northeast than it is most places anyway. But obviously the suicide rate's gone up. I'm assuming that your work is busier at the minute with everything that's going on as well, is it not?
It is. I mean, at my station, we do the normal everyday firefighter role that everybody does at all the different stations, as well as the water speciality. So we're quite busy. We're in the city centre, so we'll get quite a lot of jobs as normal firefighters, as well as the rescue technicians, what we do. But yeah, it's all increased. Obviously, everybody's at home. Touching on the normal firefighter roles that we do, everybody's at home. Everybody started cooking. The people that normally wouldn't have cooked in the past. The ovens are, aren't getting clean, so house fires are going up. Electrical equipment are being charged a lot more, laptops, iPads. But obviously mental health has always been an issue all over, really. But the Northeast is one of the highest for mental health problems. And people don't realise how busy we can be on the water. But yeah, that's on the increase as well.
So I know the word suicide is a bit of a dirty word for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I know people don't really obviously want to talk about suicide. People don't want to think about suicide. And obviously suicide is something that's an important factor in my life, important factor in your life in terms of what we do. And I suppose we've become a little bit desensitized to the word, that we can use it. And I think it's important that we do use it and that we can talk very openly and very honestly about this sort of thing. It breaks my heart being from the Northeast, knowing that the Northeast has one of the highest rates in the country. It just breaks my heart generally that people feel suicidal, that people want to end their own lives. And as you know, I have personal experience with having lost my husband to suicide 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
And that's what set me on the quest. You know, basically, I needed to understand suicide. I needed to understand depression. I wanted to find the antidote. I knew that if I didn't, I'd probably end up either slowly killing myself or deliberately killing myself. I was kind of, you know, needed to either make it the crap underneath my feet and grow from there, or else I was going to go the same way. And the devastation, obviously, that it caused me, that it caused parents, that it caused everyone.
It's a ripple effect, isn't it?
I mean, grief's horrible. You know, losing somebody to an illness is horrible. Of course it is. But losing somebody to suicide, you kind of get trapped in the grief.
Yeah.
Obviously, if Jim had died of cancer, in order to get through my grieving process, I would have been angry at the cancer.
Yeah.
But because Jim took his own life, getting angry at him didn't get me through the grief, you know? You get caught in this whirlwind of guilt, and you know the constant theme in your head is what if only, if I had done this, if I hadn't have done that. The knock-on effect that it has with everybody. I mean, you talk to Jim's dad or my dad now about Jim, and they'll, you know, proper northern fellas, you know, but they will cry, you know. It really does affect everybody. And I think I kind of took it on myself to kind of get on my proverbial white horse and try and help people that are suicidal, because I don't want anybody to go through what I went through, what my family have gone through, what some of them are still going through. Losing somebody to suicide just has to be, I can't, you know, I mean, obviously there are worse things, but it is up there with one of the most horrific things that you can experience. And you and I were talking a little bit before. Obviously, we've spoken about suicide and mental health stuff and all the rest of it before. But you and I were talking about, there's obviously the people that try it and aren't successful and get the wake-up call and turn their life around, like the last that you were telling me about. That was your first case, wasn't it? Go on, tell me a little bit about that, Angelo. What happened when you first started working there?
Basically, it was one of my first jobs, and we got called out to somebody attempting, threatening to attempt suicide, and we got there, and cutting a long story short, I had to go out and I had to swim and get this person in and administered first aid, passed them on to paramedics. Cutting a long story short, they basically, that individual recovered quite well and managed to get the help that they needed, the support. And beyond that, I ended up bumping into this individual, which I didn't realize that she'd had 2 kids, you know. And then to see somebody that was unsuccessful who could turn their life around was an amazing kind of concept, to be able to see that they've turned it around, they've done something, they've gotten the right help that they needed, and that's it, they're back on the feet. Yes, I'm sure that person will have the good days and the bad days as everybody else does, but the help was there, and they managed to become that mom again, you know. And it's an amazing thing to see, and unfortunately not everyone is that lucky.
Yeah, I think you and I as well, like, I think you had that massive wake-up call. We think unless we're personally touched by suicide, we have all of these preconceived notions of how it's cowardly or how it's attention-seeking or all of these different things. But to think of obviously quite a young lass, she had 2 young kids, right?
Yeah.
What on earth can be so bad when you've got 2 kids that you want to end it all? It begs belief, doesn't it? Fortunately for most of us, we'll not be able to understand that, comprehend that at all, fortunately, because that's not, you know, the mind, the headspace that we're in. But it is something that everybody has an idea about what suicide is. I mean, one of the things you told me that I just couldn't believe is that obviously if somebody's wanting to jump like off the Tyne Bridge and they're holding the traffic up, people roll their windows down and say, jump, you're holding the traffic up. I mean,
The
Wow,
lack of compassion in some people is just unbelievable. It just, you end up standing there with your chin on the floor and disbelief, and just because somebody's day has been disrupted by 20-30 minutes of a traffic jam or an inconvenience of it, and to say something along those lines, it's just we seem to have lost with compassion for each other, and it's such a sad state of affairs at the minute.
I do think, though, with everything going on with this coronavirus lockdown craziness that we're going through, I would like to think, and I have seen it for myself, that people are being nicer, I think. I mean, not everyone will necessarily agree with me, but people are looking out for each other more. People are checking in on their neighbours. People are making those phone calls that, they don't keep in touch with people. Obviously, a lot of people aren't working and have the time to do so. But I do think that people are kind of starting to realise as well, like celebrities that are whinging from their mansion, when they've got nothing to whinge about. I think we're seeing people, we're kind of connecting with the love with people rather than the people that are, fake and phony. We're kind of becoming more real, I think. Would you think?
I think there's been a lot of good in the world. There's always been a lot of good in the world. I think we just needed something to make us open our eyes and see it a little bit more. I think there's a lot of decent people, a lot of big-hearted people that go out of their way to look out for one another. And I think in recent times, this has been elaborated a lot more, and we're seeing a lot more of it. There's a lot more, on social media, people just doing random acts of kindness and checking in on elderly, checking in on neighbours. I mean, for instance, in my estate, we've created a WhatsApp group, and everybody in my street, where there's been like notes put through doors of like phone numbers, and if you add this number on, you'll get added onto WhatsApp group, and all of a sudden we've got a street now. The entire street is in this WhatsApp group, and if someone's going shopping, they'll put it on there. If someone's come up with a great idea of how to entertain the kids, they'll put a video or a couple of pictures or ideas or quizzes and questions how to entertain the kids. So I think that's always been there, but we've been so wrapped up in our own little bubble with the hustle and bustle of work, with everything else that's going on, and pressures nowadays. I mean, going back, when I was a kid, when the man would go out to work and he would earn enough for the household, and the man would be at home cooking, cleaning, everything was
looking after the kids. Yeah,
everything was so much more simple.
Yeah.
Whereas now, to live, just to get by with the basics, you need both adults to be out working to support, and you've got childcare issues, you've got everything else that's added on. It puts so much pressure on everyone. But recently, over the last few weeks, people have taken their foot off the accelerator a little bit and just stood back and just looked around at what's actually important.
Yeah.
And it's opened a lot of people's eyes,
Yeah. And I'm hopeful that obviously as things start to change, I don't think things will go back to normal necessarily, but I do believe that people will take that forward. Everybody has, that I've been speaking to around my neighborhood and stuff, and different friends and family and whatnot, that people are seeing that, and I do think that that's what life's about. I mean, I know you did an interview on the radio. I'll not say anything about you having a face for radio, Pet.
I knew that was coming.
We'll try and keep all the private jokes and the banter to a minimum. I know when you did a radio interview, was in January, wasn't it?
Was
it January? Yeah. You were talking about how you cope and you deal with obviously the stuff that you go through on a daily basis. You've got your own kind of coping mechanisms, haven't you, of how you deal with stuff? Like generally, apart from obviously the stuff that's going on at the minute. How, like, obviously you must have gone through, and I'm not wanting to obviously paint horrific pictures for people here, but you must have gone through some stuff that nobody in their right mind should ever have to deal with, right? You wouldn't want anyone. You certainly wouldn't want your sister or your mom to have to, or me, to have to go through something like that. How do you cope with it? How do you deal with it? What is it that you do?
I think what this is coming from a military mindset mind. So a lot of people that haven't had that understanding or close contact with military or uniformed services, they'll not understand it. So as a group of people doing things like, whether it's in the military or the fire service, the police, paramedics, whatever, if you go through an experience, a traumatic experience or whatever, you've got that team and you've got that black humor, and you've all been in it together. You've all witnessed the same thing. And when you come back to, when your patrol's over, or you come back from an incident or whatever the situation was, you talk about it, and you'll get a cup of tea. If it's in the middle of the night, you'll grab a slice of toast. You'll put your feet up and you'll talk about it and vent. And I think that's a very vital thing to get you through. Whether you've got trauma support in whatever role that you're doing, they'll come in and they'll discuss things with you. But they've described it to me, and I've always known this for a long time, that the brain is like a pressure cooker. And basically, if you just put a lid on it and lock down and say nothing, speak nothing, say, not vent that frustration or what's going on in your mind, or be able to express your feelings or your emotions, it builds up and builds up to the point where one of these days you will have a mental breakdown because you can't cope with it anymore. So, especially in the role that I'm in at the moment, if we have a fatality, or if we have a traumatic experience within an incident, it triggers off trauma support, and they'll come down. It's not compulsory. They'll basically come down and they'll bring a tin of biscuits, or a tray of muffins or whatever, and they'll sit down.
Which normally muffins and biscuits is enough to sort anyone out, really, Angelo, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. With a great big cup of tea, that sorts me out every time. But they'll come in and they'll start talking about the incident, and they'll ask who done what. And before you know it, majority of people that wanted to be involved, they've opened up and they've expressed how things felt, what they'd seen. And that's the beauty of it, being able to just release that pressure every now and then. But me personally, I'm pretty good at going to work. I put that uniform on, I do my shift, and once I'm finished, I'll change into my civilian clothing. And once I'm out the station, 99% of the time, I'm pretty good at just leaving work at work, going home. But sometimes there's a little bit of an overlap, whether, I don't know, just off the top of my head, something like I go to an incident where an individual's wearing a certain garment of clothing that matched what my son had. And it just gives you that kind of crossover where you can link it to your own life, or you can see something connected into your personal life. Sometimes that does get to you, but ever since I was a kid, I've always trained, and I'm a huge believer that training makes you feel, obviously it releases endorphins, it makes you feel better. And if I've had a bad day at work and I just can't switch off, I'll get my running trainers on, I'll go out for a run. I do a little bit of boxing, and there's no better feeling than getting punched in the face at training. So I'll go in the gym, I'll have a little bit, a few rounds, just to have that release, have that personal time to be able to just let go of everything. And by the time I get back home, I'm emotionally completely vented off. Physically, I'm exhausted. I just need some food, and I'll refer back to the muffins and a great big cup of tea. I'm back on track,
Yeah, I think one of the other things I've noticed as well with the lockdown, there's a lot of people taking up jogging, a lot of joggers around, a lot of people out on their bikes and stuff again. As much as obviously there are the cons to all of this, and obviously a lot of people concerned about work and money and all the rest of it. In terms of fitness, in terms of family, although obviously I'm sure we know domestic violence is up and everything like that, but for the majority of it is like getting back to basics. And you said before about back in the day when it was the one parent that was that went out to work, typically the dad, and the mom stayed at home and looked after the kids.
Yeah.
That's what I think life should be about, whether it's the dad that stays at home or the mom that stays, we should be with our children. We should be like working as a unit together. And I think there was probably less problems for mental health stuff when there was a parent at home as well. Everything does go back to childhood and society, that it's just become so expensive that our priorities are wrong, right? We're chasing the dollar rather than chasing the kids around the garden, you know, and to hear when I'm sitting outside, when the weather's, thankfully the weather's been lovely, to hear all the kids laughing in the neighbours' gardens, there's no better sound,
No,
you
definitely
know?
not.
And I really do think that hopefully people are kind of really getting to understand just what is important, you know, rather than just being constantly involved in drinking coffee Monday to Friday and getting drunk on a weekend. You know, there's more to life than that, you know? Drink the
Yeah,
coffee to get you through the week and the alcohol to relax. It's like, you know, people get into these hamster wheels, don't they, of doing the kind of the same thing to make ends meet. And it's not a life. It really
ab-
isn't. It's surviving, not thriving.
absolutely. And I think it's the last 5-6 weeks has been a massive point of making people realise this. And I hope, I mean, to think off the top of my head, I would probably say a majority of people would walk away from this and think, do you know what? I now see what's important. I need to stick to that. I need to try and hold on to that for as long as I can. But unfortunately, there's going to be a small group of people who will come out of this lockdown and within 2, 3, 4 months, they'll be back to normal. They'll be back to chasing that dollar and life will go back to normal for them and they'll miss out on the important things. And once that time goes with the kids, once the kids are up and away, you're never going to get that back.
Yeah.
I'm quite fortunate because my shifts, I work 4 days on and I get 4 days off. Now, on my 4 days off, I have my little boy. Unfortunately, I've not had him for the last 5 weeks because I'm at high risk at my job of being exposed to this virus. So I made the decision, because his mum is on lockdown, for him to stay at his mum's. So once I get him back, I mean, I'll carry on my old lifestyle that I've done for years with him now. And I could do overtime. I could go out and, pick up some extra shifts. But my time with him is more important. Once he's up and away and he's finished school and he's way too cool to hang about with his dad and be seen with his dad, then that's
Won't
my
be
time.
long.
Like, exactly. It comes so quick, and he's 11 now, you know.
No.
He is. I know it's not hard to beat. He's nearly my height as well. So, but yeah, when the
He's
time
a lovely
comes,
lad. I do love, I'm not going to say his name, but I do love your little lad. He's just, oh, he always gives me something whenever I see him. And I've kept every single pebble and little koala and God knows what else he's given us. He's just an absolute angel of a lad. And that's testimony to you and his mum, obviously, the way he's been raised.
thank you very much. He does always ask about you. So when
Oh,
all this is over, we're going to have to meet up again for a bit
an
of
ice cream. Yeah, get the dogs crying with their brain freeze. Yeah.
Totally.
Definitely, I look forward to that. But yeah, I do. I think this is, you know, if we can really get some massive takeaways from this, people, and I think people is really about what is important, and it is about connections with people, isn't it? It is really about having good relationships, being kind, looking out for each other. That's what life's all about, surely. That's the only thing that is important.
It is, and it should be at the forefront of our minds to look out for one another and reach out to each other. And it's not just your own little bubble. It's, look beyond that. There is a lot of good in the world. And touching back on what you said about there's a lot of people out running, and obviously with my background being in the military, I've always been into my fitness, and to me it's just part and parcel of everyday life. I'll train anywhere between 7 and 10 times a week, but that's my weekly routine. I think a lot of people have had no other choice recently but to go out, because it's the only way of getting out and getting exercise, whether they're not working, whether they're stuck at home, whatever the reasons. I think fitness just instantly makes you feel better about yourself and makes that situation seem a little bit less daunting. So whatever you've got going on in your life, if you've got a little bit of training ethics behind you, and you've got that routine where I finish work, I go train, or I go training before work, or whatever it is people decide to do, life doesn't seem as bad as it was. Sitting at home, doing nothing, not going out, not seeing anybody, especially for people that don't work or they're out of employment or whatever. If they're sitting at home all the time, not going out, not having that release, that little bit of a workout, getting the heart rate going, it's just going to get worse and worse. And it's a vicious circle, because once it gets hold of you, you just get deeper and deeper, and it's so much harder to come out of.
Yeah.
So if I was to ever advise anybody, and I have done this many a times with people, it's the best medicine going, to be honest with you. Before you go seeing the doctor, I mean, I'm not advising anybody on how to, treat themselves or whatever, but just try that gym, try that. Get a pair of trainers on, go in the sun, go for a little jog. It doesn't have to be 5, 10, 20-mile sprint.
Yeah.
You can get on your push bike and just go for a bike ride along the park, take a picnic with you. That in itself will make you feel so much better. And if that doesn't work, obviously you're going to have to go and seek some professional help. But fitness goes a long way in my book to making people see things through,
Yeah. There was a book written years ago called Puma or Prozac. Basically, the choice was get your exercise on, or you'll be on antidepressants.
Yeah.
And it does, for a lot of people. It is and we do live such sedentary lifestyles, really. Cars and computers and mobile phone. We are sedentary. We aren't supposed to be sedentary creatures, right? We are supposed to be moving, and it's true. But here's a question, and I know the answer already, right? So don't mess this one up for us, Ange.
I'll try
no
not
pressure.
to.
No pressure. What does you more good, running outside for an hour or running on a treadmill for an hour?
Well, running is running for fitness. However, in my book, there's no better feeling than getting that fresh air into your lungs. It doesn't matter if it's along on a pavement, in a park. I'm very fortunate. I live right on the coast. I'm 30 seconds away from the beach, so I can run for miles and miles along the beachfront. But personally, fitness is fitness. It's getting the heart pumping. It's getting your lungs breathing heavier. It's doing you good. But if you can get out and about, get the fresh air, get out the house, then 4 walls become very claustrophobic. Get out and do some exercise outside.
Yeah, I kind of feel sorry for the people that sit in the traffic jams to get to the gym to run on a treadmill for an hour, that kind of old adage. But I think there's benefit being outside. And obviously at the minute with the lockdown and everything and the craziness of what we can and can't do, being outside is really, really important. These brick houses that we live in, these cities that we live in, these concrete jungles that we live in, that isn't what we're supposed to be doing either. We're supposed to be one with nature. And I really do think that if you're physically not able to go running or jogging or do any of those things, that even just sitting on the grass and making a bloody daisy chain does you the world of good. Getting that skin to earth contact. And I think, that's probably why, yes, definitely the fresher air than inside a gym or inside your living room or whatever. But I think, being able to be with nature, because we are organic, natural beings too, right? I think that helps us amazingly so. In fact, I will quite often say to clients when the sun's shining, sit on the grass and make as many bloody daisy chains as you can. Totally. And you'll feel better for it, So you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone, proverbially, there when you're going out for a run on the beach there, right? And being near water, the energy that you get, the way that helps as well is really grounding. So you did the right move. Being by the beach.
Being outdoors is far better than being stuck indoors in them 4 walls. I think that the more you are outdoors, the better. Like with my little boy, I'm always we have this debate with I can't believe I'm going to say this, but before the lockdown, I used to always tell him off for how much time he spent on his Xbox, and I'd be like, get your bike, let's go out, you go on your bike, I'll go for a run, trying to get 2 birds with 1 stone kind of thing. But since the lockdown, obviously my contact with him has stopped because, as I said before, he's with his mum. So I thought, just to get that little bit more interaction with him, I'll start going on his Xbox, which is at my house, because he's got an Xbox, which is at his mum's house.
Well, so of course, he has to have 2.
Well, of course,
yes.
That's the way kids roll.
That's the way it is, yeah.
So me being the old dinosaur that I am, I had to create this account and blah, 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 blah. So eventually I got on. And I started playing this game with him called Fortnite, and I am as useless as they come. I am the liability in the group. So we've been playing this game, and all his mates are getting involved to protect me, to look after me, because I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. So initially, I went on for about an hour, and I've got the headset on. We're talking to each other. He's telling me what I need to do, blah, blah, blah. And I says, right, I'm really going to have to go to the loo here because I'm bursting. So I put the game on pause. I got myself a drink. And as I was walking back on the Xbox, I thought I'd been on for somewhere like, I don't know, an hour and a half. And I was thinking about wrapping it up because I had other things to do. And I sat down and I looked at my watch, and we'd been on for over 4 hours.
Wow.
Like, it was unbelievable. So I looked at my watch, and it was 4 hours later. And I was like, where has the time gone? And I thought about it afterwards once I come off the Xbox. And I was like, the amount of times I've like restricted him and told him that he spends way too much. And within my first experience of the Xbox with him, I lost 4 hours just like that. And time just flew. And I can understand why people go on and they spend, you
get lost in it.
Oh, it becomes life.
Yeah.
And being in that bubble where you can talk to other people. So I'm going to have to do some adjustments when he comes back to us, where we're going to have to find a happy medium, because it just engrosses you into that world, and time goes by so quick,
And I suppose there's a lot of people needing to kill time at the moment as well, right? So I suppose getting lost in that online world isn't such a bad thing if you've got some time to kill. But you get wrapped up in these things. I mean, I know from experience of a certain 16-year-old that's upstairs and his addiction to all of that, and trying to get him away from it. I see obviously that, it kind of, just like with television, isn't it? I don't watch telly, but if I go around to someone's house and they've got the telly on, you can see just how you're sucked into it.
Totally.
This sort of stuff just totally distracts you, and maybe that's what we need sometimes, that distraction. But obviously too much of it, and I don't know. I think it can have. I think you do need to find that compromise, obviously, with your little one. But
well, on the back of that, I'm no child psychologist, by the way, but there's a little place where I take my boy and my two nephews just outside Newcastle. It's about 20-30 minute drive from my house, and it's a wooded area. This family's got this wooded area. They let you go on with the cars. There's no toilets, no showers, no electrics, no amenities whatsoever. It's just very, very, very basic. And I've taken the three boys, and we've gone up, we've drove up, and I've stopped iPads, I've stopped phones, they've used them in the car to get there. We've left them in the car, and then once we're out the car, it's all about camping. We'll pitch the tents, where I've taught them how to set fires, and initially they're like, I'm bored. Well, you're not bored, because we haven't built a tent yet. We haven't sorted our fireplace.
I haven't opened the tin of beans.
Exactly. So don't even start with that. And you get that little bit of resistance for that first 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever. But once you get stuck in and they forget about these gadgets, I tell you what, the kids completely change, because all of a sudden they've got this massive wooded area where they can just do what they want. We can build tree swings, we'll build the fire. I'll send them off to get the sticks, the branches, the wood, the seats, the whatever. And before you know it, it's got dark, and we've got the marshmallows out, we've got the juice out, we're eating popcorn, they've got the head torches on, and they're like, can we go for a wander? But because they're not used to it, and it's pitch black, and they've got the torches, they've gone for wonders, and I can see them for miles, because there's no light pollution, there's no nothing, and you can hear them. And these kids, all of a sudden, become the kids what we were when we were younger.
Yeah.
And not once did I ask for the iPads or the phone, because they're having so much fun. And that's the beauty of it for me, to be able to see kids being kids, not see the top of their heads completely ignoring you, and you ask them to do something 4, 5, 6 times and haven't even heard you.
Yeah.
But when you put them in that environment and remove all the technology away from them, they become these amazing young kids and you see yourself in them as well. You know the way you used to be. And it's just amazing,
It's like coming home. For me, spending time in nature feels like coming home. Feels like where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. I love what we're talking about. I love how we're going off on all sorts of wonderful tangents and stuff. I want to bring us back to mental health stuff though for a second, because there's a few things that I want to talk about. I know you've mentioned to me, obviously, that you've seen, obviously, with all of your experience with everything, you've had a change of heart in terms of how you view suicide. And as I think I was touching on before, like people, you know, they feel unless they've had experience with losing someone to suicide or they've been suicidal themselves, they really don't understand it, which, as I say, is a good thing, right? I don't really want anybody to understand it. But mental health, obviously, we're getting to a stage now, fortunately, where people are able to openly talk about mental health more so than they ever were. There's still stigmas, obviously. But in terms of suicide, I kind of want to put this out there, because if there's anybody listening that knows somebody who's suicidal, or if there's anybody listening who is suicidal, I kind of want to give my take on it. And by all means, give me your input when I say my little spiel, Ange. For me, my understanding, depression, right? I'm sure there's obviously environmental factors. Obviously, if your diet's rubbish and you're not exercising and you're not drinking enough water and all that sort of thing, obviously it doesn't help. But I don't think that causes it. I don't think there's a genetic thing or anything like that. I think it's literally self-loathing. Whatever way I look at it, I really believe that somebody who's depressed really thinks they are worthless, or really beating themselves up and telling themselves things that aren't true and getting themselves into a really, really deep hole. I know when I started looking into depression and what to do if you were feeling depressed, and obviously I felt severely depressed at times after Jim died and have battled with depression all my life as well. I was told by lots of gurus out there that in order to not feel depressed, you've got to focus on what you're thankful for, what you're grateful for. And I'm like, well, that's a lovely idea, but a depressed person can't do that. They can't feel grateful. They can't feel thankful. So I think people only get suicidal when obviously they've been dealing with depression for a long time. And obviously everyone's different, but just as kind of a general idea. Somebody that's been suffering with depression and getting themselves deeper, deeper, deeper into a self-loathing hole, pushing people away from them because they inadvertently do that so that people treat them the way that they feel that they should be treated. When you get yourself into such a deep, dark hole that you really feel that there's no other option and that the world would benefit from you not being there. And it's a horrible, horrible place to be. And because nobody really wants to talk about suicide, nobody really wants to even say the word suicide, and because people don't understand it and have these different things, I just want people to know that if you're suicidal, you need to obviously know that there are people like me that can help. But you need to stop being horrible to yourself. You need to stop lying to yourself about how useless you are, how crap you are, how you can't do the things that we tell ourselves. And you and I have spoken about this before. If we believe something, we make it true, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If I'm told I've got a terminal illness and I believe it, I'm going to act like I've got a terminal illness, whether or not I've got one or not. Or if I'm a hypochondriac and I've got a headache, before you know it, I'm going to have all these other symptoms because I've Googled it and now I've got a brain tumor. There's a thing called the nocebo. You can actually become something that, even though it's not true, you make it true for you and your body reacts to it. So for somebody who's suicidal, who loathes themselves, they've basically been telling themselves a whole load of lies. And if they could see themselves through somebody's eyes that cares about them, they could see themselves for who they truly are. If they can stop listening to their ego mind that's basically just driving them down that road and telling them that they're useless, and actually start to look at things a little bit away from themselves, if they can kind of remove themselves from that situation and see themselves, and I've got techniques that I do in therapy that can help people to do that, then they can actually see themselves how everybody else sees them, rather than the lies that they've been telling themselves about how useless they are and all the rest of it. Because nobody is. Nobody's useless. People might get themselves into horrible holes or horrible situations, but everybody has got a part to play. Everybody needs everybody. Like we were talking before about, like, you know, this community spirit that's going on that's been somehow lost over these years. If we have all a more of a community spirit, if we are all more looking out for each other, and people do have those options to vent and let go and not bottle things up, then people wouldn't necessarily get down into that suicidal way. So I just want people to know that if anybody's listening to this who's suicidal or who knows anybody that's suicidal, they want to share this with, there are other options. You might feel like you've explored them all, but you certainly haven't had a conversation with crazy Geordie Angela. It doesn't sound much like a Geordie most of the time. You know, teaching somebody, we don't get taught at school how to be happy. We don't get taught at school. Maybe if you go to one of the more elite schools, you'll come out with a lot more confidence than if you go to a bog standard comprehensive. But we don't get taught at school how to be happy. We don't get taught at school how to be confident. Nowhere, and not even at the Scouts or the Brownies or anywhere do we get these lessons. So nobody teaches us how to be happy. And for me, being happy is focusing like you would on somebody that you care about. If I asked you to describe one of your mates that you think the world of, you'd only give me positive things, even though there's obviously things, none of us are perfect. Everyone's got their flaws, but you would only think about those things. Yet we don't do that for ourselves. We don't look at our good points. We only ever look at our bad points, and that becomes our world. So there are things that you can do. There are things that people can do in order to get out of that hole. But it all starts with stopping lying to yourself about being useless and actually looking at what your good points and your good qualities are and building from there. And I just thought, because of obviously everything that we were talking about, I wanted to put that out there to help anybody that it might help. But anything that you've got to say on that, obviously with all of your experience with all of this stuff, chip in.
To be honest, the only thing that I can put forward to this, just to concrete what you've just said, as I said to you before, in the current role that I do, I've actually seen people doing this, and fortunate they've been unsuccessful. So to see them to then turn things around and then become in that happy place where they've got the support, whatever that support may be, to be able to turn that around and live a relatively normal life and be happy and find that and grab hold of that happiness and run with it. It's priceless, and if you can, that's a way forward. Suicide's not the answer for me, like, definitely not.
A permanent solution to a temporary problem, as they say, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Well, let's lighten it up a little bit. Let's talk about what we want to see, right? What changes in the world are going on that we still want to have implemented after all of this stuff goes back to normal, whatever the new normal is or whatever. What are the changes that you and I can promise ourselves that we will take forward? What is it that we would like everybody to do, but what are we going to do in terms of this?
To keep the love going. The love that's going on at the minute. I mean, yeah, this whole lockdown has brought out some amazing stories. So plenty of love around estates, around families, around strangers. It's also brought out a lot of negativity and a lot of fools as well. But I think keep that reaching out to each other, being compassionate to one another.
What's that veteran? It's his birthday today, isn't it? He got 120,000 birthday cards or 12,000 birthday cards or something. That guy that did his laps for the NHS,
Captain Tom.
Captain Tom. Happy birthday to Captain. Stuff like that we'd never have known about without this, would we? Totally. I mean, that's beautiful. That is sharing the love and keeping the love. Let's keep doing stuff like that, because Captain Tom, I'm sorry, but I admire him a million times more than I do Richard Branson.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. It's the little things like that, and love makes the world go around. I mean, I've always worked in male-dominated kind of industries, and I've always been ridiculed because I'm the first one to go, do you want a hug? If somebody feels down, and it is, in a way, it's kind of a joke and kind of little bit of banter, and it brings that little bit of humor into it. But the hug still stands, and it makes the world go round.
I miss hugs.
So yeah, look out for one another, keep the love going.
And when we can hug again, hug everyone.
Absolutely, yeah. I might get arrested if I start doing that.
Oh, Lush, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you, darling. I can't believe it's been nearly 50 minutes. It feels like 5, but it always does when we catch up. So yes, people, anyone that's still listening after all this time, love. If I was to just put it in one word that I want to take forward into this world, it's love. That love for each other. And certainly, darling, I love you to bits. I always have. You always make me smile. We always have a good crack. We can go for years and years without seeing each other, and it's always just like yesterday. And I do appreciate that I've got some amazing friends like that I can do that with. So I will speak to you again soon.
Yeah.
We will obviously keep in touch. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep looking after everyone, Angelo. Really do appreciate it. And thanks to everybody for listening. Cheers, Ange. See ya.
See you later.